And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Fighting out of the blue corner, the Crested Gecko. This gecko came in weighing at 43 grams. It has been the reigning champion, the world's most popular pet gecko for 8 consecutive years. And in the red corner, we have the Gargoyle Gecko. This guy is weighing at 54 grams. This gecko has been smashing through the rankings because of its boldness and vigor. Only one will leave the champion. Now, Gargoyle geckos are a little bit of a sturdier gecko in my opinion. They're tougher just all around. The bones on top of their head are solid and their skin is a little bit rougher than the crested geckos. These guys are notorious because they are gecko eaters in the wild. They're definitely gonna be the toughest of the two, the more vicious of the two geckos, but that doesn't translate into handling or into keeping them as a pet. These guys are not gonna be biting you, they're not gonna be aggressive. Of course, there are anomalies, there are some geckos that are more aggressive than others, but that goes for both ways, crested geckos and gargoyle geckos. The one thing I do like about the gargoyle geckos is that their reds and their oranges are way better than the crested geckos. Now, crested geckos may have more patterns and more morphs right now, but the gargoyle geckos take the cake when it comes to the color, in my opinion. Of course, cresteds are gonna have some crazy yellows as well, but if your thing is the reds, if your thing is orange coloration, you're gonna wanna go with a gargoyle gecko. So crested geckos are one of the most popular pet geckos in the world. Now, the reason being of how easy they are and the variety of colors that they come in. But these guys are gonna be a little bit easier to find and more affordable to buy than the gargoyle gecko. These guys are more prolific breeders, so that means there's more of a supply out there for people who want to get them. Typically, a crested gecko, like a normal crested gecko, is gonna run you anywhere from like $45 to $80. And the higher end morphs, of course, are gonna go into the 200, 300, 400, or even higher amount of money. So it just depends on where you want to come in. If you're looking to get the most inexpensive animal, the most inexpensive gecko, the crested gecko is going to win that round. Now, one thing that I love about the crested geckos is how agile they are. They are excellent jumpers, they are excellent climbers, and that is one thing that they have over the gargoyle geckos. From my experience, these guys are better climbers. They just overall, they even have bigger toe pads. The gargoyle geckos are gonna tend to stand still more. They're gonna kind of like just chill on your arm more than like a crested gecko would. If you like a gecko that's gonna walk around, it's gonna be always moving, jumping. I personally love that, some people don't. The crested geckos are definitely more active. Now, if you're looking to breed crested geckos or gargoyle geckos and your main factor is basically the popularity, what's gonna sell the best, crested geckos are probably gonna be up there. These guys, you could go to any pet store, there's gonna be a crested gecko. They are so easy to find and so many people want them. Gargoyle geckos, on the other hand, because they are a little bit more niche, they're gonna be a little bit harder to find, but there is a market for that as well if you want to go into that market. But if you're looking for like a bread and butter type animal that's easy to breed, easy to care for, it's definitely gonna be the crested gecko. Now, another thing to take in consideration if you're looking to breed these guys is that crested geckos are a little bit more forgiving. Now, what I mean by that is that a crested gecko female, technically, she's gonna be ready to breed in about 1.5 years. You know, you could start producing eggs. As long as she's of size, she's gonna start producing eggs, and typically they're all gonna be fertile. The female's gonna be okay. But I find that with gargoyle geckos, if you start to breed too early, and too early being anywhere before 2 or 2.5 years. Honestly, I prefer to go maybe even 3 years with them. You could have a lot of problems with the females, as in they're gonna start to crash. They're gonna have a low, amount of calcium. You're gonna see their tail start to go squiggly, and they're just gonna lay crappy eggs, So what I definitely wanna do with gargoyle geckos, if I'm breeding them, for the females, wait 2.5 to maybe even 3 years. With a crested gecko, I could breed them in 1.5 to 2 years. As long as they're a steady 45 gram weight for the crested geckos. For the gargoyle geckos, I like to wait until they're maybe like 50 grams. Now, another really cool trait of the Gargoyle Geckos is that they tend to be a little bit more bold than Crested Geckos. They aren't both nocturnal species, so sometimes, the majority of the time, they're going to be hiding. But I do see that Gargoyle Geckos tend to be out during the day more. And if you provide a UVB lamp or some sort of fluorescent lighting, they all tend to come out and bask. Now, I do think Gargoyle Geckos are the hardier of the two. Not just because they're tougher skin, but because they actually can tolerate the heat a little bit better than a Crested Gecko. Now, both of these geckos, you're not gonna wanna go above 85 degrees, but the babies, I find that they grow super fast when you keep them around 80 degrees, whereas I'm really worried about my Crested Gecko babies if they're in the 80-degree range. I wanna make sure they're very hydrated if it comes to that temperature. Now, another thing that's cool about the Gargoyle Geckos that the Crested Geckos lack is that they can regenerate their tail. That's right, Crested Geckos, as we all know, once they drop their tail, that's it, they become a frog butt. But Gargoyle Geckos, if this guy decides to drop his tail, in a couple months, it will grow back. Now, that is a very, very cool thing about Gargoyle Geckos, and it's definitely something that's gonna be hard for the Crested Gecko to beat him on. And after a hard-fought battle, we go to a decision. All three judges scored for a split decision for the Gargoyle